Mima should eat. This is gross. Removes half of your brain. That's crazy. Oh my god. Now, it is no secret that we are living in divisive times when it comes to medicine. Well, really when it comes to anything, but this particular video is about medicine. The COVID panic is nothing new, of course. People have been wary of vaccinations through all of history. As far back as the 1860s, anti-vaccine organizations were running advertisements, writing to newspapers, and forming protests against smallpox vaccinations. And let's not forget in more recent times when soccer moms all over the world insisted that their child's measles vaccine would somehow cause autism. Where are they now? A lot of the following medical procedures could be considered as falling from the same tree. Perhaps they are modern miracles, or maybe they're ancient treatments that have stood the test of time. Here are some medical procedures that sound insane, but actually work.
But nevertheless, it goes to show my potential.
Clostridium. This word, difficile, is an anaerobic bacteria that is heavily present in dirt, hospitals, and apparently your ass. This bacterium is capable of producing spores in our colons that are non-symptomatic in about 2 to 5% of the human population. It is also one of the most commonly passed bacteria in hospitals, with 30% of transmissions being related to in-house patients. Though the high hospital transmission rates is most likely because of this next fun fact. C. difficile is almost exclusively transmitted from the rectum into the mouth. That's right. In order to be properly infected with this bacterium, you have to quite literally eat shit. And while your weird uncle may have you questioning it, most people are not often put into the position of eating feces. Typically, doctors and nurses interact with the stool, and then the surfaces they come into contact with remain infected for quite some time. The infection has a number of effects, including this, that I can't pronounce, sepsis, toxic megacolon, which sounds like a supervillain, and of course, diarrhea. So how do you cure this infection? With antibiotics. Actually, 3 antibiotics specifically. These guys right here. But let's say none of these proven medicines have worked and your poor Mima has been sat over her toilet into the wee hours of the night. What is one to do? Well, take her to an experimental medical practitioner. Said experimental medical practitioner will then say something that will trigger in you an instinctive desire to attack him. Mima should eat shit. At the time of recording, human feces is still considered an experimental drug in the United States. That's not a joke, that's a real fact. Here's a photo. But fecal microbiota transplants, the act of transferring fecal bacteria from one person to another, is proven to be more effective in fighting C. difficile infections than at least 2 of the antibiotics I previously mentioned. The idea is simple. The healthy bacteria and natural antibacterials from a donor will combat the toxic C. difficile that is growing in the patient's colon and digestive tract. And it sounds insane, but this therapy actually works. 81% of patients were actually cured after a single infusion, and 90% were healthy after a second. Now, you do have to actually infuse the bacteria, and yes, what I said before was true. There are a few methods of infusion. Enemas are common, so are colonoscopies, but it has not been unheard of for infusion to occur in capsule form. There you have it, folks. If you're having stomach problems, the real medical solution may be for you to literally eat shit. During the Civil War, a Confederate doctor by the name of J.F. Zacharias began a radical new procedure on his racist compatriots. As men returned to camp with blown-off legs and arms, Zacharias stopped doing his job. That's right, Zacharias simply stopped cleaning men's wounds and introduced maggots into the dead tissue, and somehow it helped them. The rate of survival went up drastically, as this particular species of maggot did not consume normal or even healing tissue. They only ate and therefore removed the necrotic material, and so a new medical procedure was born. Of course, this wasn't the first time maggot therapy was done on a patient. Maggots have been used as folk medicine for centuries. There are plenty of documented records praising the healing effects of baby blowflies, from the Mayans to the Australian Aborigines to the general surgeon of Napoleon, who used maggots on the French army as they literally took over the planet. Later, during World War II, military doctors lauded the therapeutic application of fly larvae, and between 1930 and 1940, maggot therapy went through a renaissance, with over 300 U.S. hospitals introducing maggot therapy as a legitimate procedure. This would not last long, however, as the rise of penicillin in 1944 would essentially halt any further interest in sticking live bugs in your body. Their idea remained dead from then up until the 1990s, when experiments and controlled studies actually showed maggot therapy to have more effective healing rates when compared to other conventional methods. As long as the issue itself was one of these specific medical problems, you may actually benefit from modern maggot therapy. And in 2004, the FDA cleared maggots produced from the common green bottlefly as a medical device, so long as it is in relation to one of those medical ailments. This is gross. Everyone has an idea of what a lobotomy is. A brutal, barbaric procedure that involved sticking ice picks into people's eyes and wiggling it around in their brain. The aftermath was often a vegetative state that we somehow thought was better than a mental illness. Humans have likely been messing with the brain since we discovered it existed, but the first documented lobotomy was performed by Portuguese neurologist Antonio Igues Moniz in 1935. After a few successful trials on chimpanzees, Moniz and his colleagues began human surgeries with a preliminary group of 20. At the time, humans generally believed that mental illness was a result of improper neurological connections. If you could sever those connections, you could cure the patient. That is what a lobotomy does, and when it first went public, it appeared to be our best option. Moniz reported that patients dealing with depression, schizophrenia, and mania had all been cured. They also no longer had any personality, comprehension, or intelligence, but Moniz didn't feel the need to record this in his trials. He later received a Nobel Peace Prize in 1949 for his efforts. That's fucking crazy. Oh my god. Lobotomies began losing popularity in the 1950s as new psychotherapeutic medicines came into the market. But the last ice pick lobotomy was completed in 1969 by a Dr. Walter Freeman. The patient died of a brain hemorrhage, and Freeman's career was promptly over. Today, the lobotomy exists in spirit with the procedural cousin known as a bilateral cingulotomy. Let me preface this by saying that this procedure is an absolute last resort for patients that have tried almost all other options. And bear with me, guys, because I'm going to attempt to explain brain surgery. The surgery targets two parts of the brain: the cingulate gyrus, which regulates emotion and pain, and the frontal lobes, which helps with reasoning, impulse, and judgment. Specifically, the cingulate gyrus connects our memories and experiences to pleasant or unpleasant emotions. It also connects those emotions to the caudate nucleus, whose function is to form habits. You can see how these parts of the brain can miscommunicate and create mental illnesses such as OCD. So, with the use of an MRI machine and a gamma knife, neurosurgeons disrupt the connections between these parts of the brain and can lessen the effects of OCD. Now, it's important for me to mention a couple of things. 1. This only works for a very specific form of OCD. 2. The procedure is an absolute last resort, and most neurosurgeons won't perform it without consent from both the patient and a close family member. And 3, the procedure is less than a shadow of what true lobotomies were. The level of specific correction is almost molecular. It is not the same as sticking an ice pick into someone's eyeball. But the rationale for both procedures remains the same, so I'm counting it. You just won't end up like Rosemary Kennedy. Moving on.
Morphe is drinking a
A hemispherectomy is an ultra-rare procedure that is almost exclusively performed on children with debilitating seizures. After the surgery is completed, 96% of patients experience a reduced or completely ceased occurrence of seizures. There's no change in memory, personality, or humor, and cognitive function is minimally affected. In fact, many patients who have undergone the surgery at young age have gone on to earn master's degrees and score above the average on intelligence tests. So why exactly is the hemispherectomy such a rare surgery reserved only as a last resort? Well, the surgery, to put it simply, removes half of your brain. Just like half. Gone. That's it. There are two forms of hemispherectomy: anatomical and functional. Functional hemispherectomies are less invasive as they focus only on the problematic brain tissue. There are also forms of the functional procedure that simply disconnect the two halves of the brain, which lets the surgeon keep more tissue inside of your skull. But that's not fun. We're here to talk about anatomical hemispherectomies, the complete removal of one half of your brain. Due to the requirements of the procedure, the frontal, parietal, temporal, and occipital lobes are all removed. Again, most patients, especially younger ones, recover fully from this procedure and don't tend to show any negative side effects. Which is insane, because I'll say it again, it takes off half of your brain. Apparently, according to researchers, the other half of the brain that is not removed tends to take up the responsibilities of the brain that was removed, so long as the procedure is done at a young age. The last spot on this list is a combination of two distinct procedures, and that is because these two are quite literally the oldest medical procedures in recorded history. Bloodletting is self-explanatory. Originating in Egypt, patients would go and visit their local whatever this is, and have their veins punctured with sharpened wood or copper. They would then dump your corrupted blood into a bucket until a healthy balance was reached. You see, in the past, a lot of the medical world was reliant on the idea that the human body had 4 humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. The path to health was maintaining a balance between these 4 bodily fluids. Bloodletting was a popular procedure for many decades, killing off many important figures, including George Washington, who died after removing 7 pints of his blood in less than 16 hours. I'm counting that as suicide. It was, however, edged out by more modern practices by the late 1800s. Today, bloodletting lives on in the form of therapeutic phlebotomies. And funny enough, the logic behind the ancient and the modern procedures are somehow similar. The main ailment phlebotomies are used for are overloads of iron in the body. The blood is removed to bring iron levels to a safe range for the patient. This goes back to the idea of balance between elements in the body. At the very least, you could say that the theory of the 4 humors was on the right track. Trepanning is believed to be the oldest medical procedure in human history, as skulls from the Stone Age have been found with what seems to be intentionally placed holes. That's right, the first medical procedure in history is simply drilling holes into someone's head. At the time, it was believed that putting a hole in someone's skull, and sometimes brain, would remove any evil spirits that have taken over the body. We don't drill into people's brains anymore, but we still occasionally drill into the skull, mostly to relieve pressure from internal bleeding. So there you have it, 5 or 6 medical procedures that are seemingly insane and still work. I hope that these stories have inspired you to stop peddling your medical bullshit on the Facebook accounts. Go ahead and subscribe, or follow, or play my content on an endless loop in the background. Join our Patreon page if you want to help us with the rent. See you next time.